Thanks for coming out. We're going to start with a little bit of a review, just so you make sure that you know basically where we've come from. So this should be pretty familiar to us, the definition of a story. Okay, let's read this together. A story is simply a character that wants something and overcomes conflict to get it. Okay, remember that? So every great story, there is a clear character, and that character is faced with conflicts and challenges, and it's how that character overcomes those conflicts and deals with them. That's what makes it a great story. And yet, what we were saying in this class is that for most of us, we would rather have a story that's free of conflict. And that's really not a great story at all. Okay, so this class has really been about making sure that you are living a life that's a great story. And that means it has these elements in it. Okay, so there's the protagonist. And what's unique about this approach is that we're saying that you have a particular totem, that you have a temperament that colors how you go through your journey. Okay, you have ambitions, which are your preferences. There's a catalytic agent, which is the inciting incident, and this is where, and there's notes here. We have really copious notes here for all of you to take. So there's even space to write on them. Okay, so make sure everyone gets one. So this is the inciting incident. I also always see this as an opening and closing of a door. There's no going back. Maybe we should leave some near the door. Okay? And then there's the conflicts, which are crises. And at the same time, in the midst of conflicts, hopefully God gives us epiphanies. We have these ahas. We wake up to what's really going on. And then finally, the audacious outcome. Now, the audacious outcome is something that we have in our heads and our hearts way early in this journey, because it's what motivates us to keep going. We keep saying, I so much prefer to want to have this true that I'll put up with all the conflicts and the challenges, even if I don't have epiphanies yet, because I don't want to just stay where I am. And we've also talked about having mentors as really important all along the way. And which totem is the good mentor for a beaver? Fox, right? And vice versa. And then who's a good totem for an owl? Dolphin, okay? And it's because those totems in pairs are both either intuitives or sensors. So they basically approach the world the same way, right? Whereas if you cross the streams, as they say not to do in Ghostbusters, right? When you have an intuitive and a sensor, or a sensor and an intuitive, it's not impossible. Some of us are married in that configuration, okay? But there's a more kind of an inner wiring that's the same. It'd be like a Mac versus a PC, right? So you have different operating systems, although there's a lot of cross-compatibility. So today, we're actually going to finish this up by talking about audacious outcomes, and the new add-on is shame. And we're going to really spend some time talking about how shame actually, it undermines us pursuing the audacious outcomes. We will talk ourselves out of pursuing these things that really stimulate us, motivate us, because of the negative impact of shame. So let's talk a little bit about audacious outcomes. An audacious outcome, this is my definition, is something so good, so preferable, so beneficial to you and others, it captures your imagination and motivates you to keep pursuing it no matter how hard or how impossible. Okay? Sometimes like you could say, the audacious outcome is running the LA Marathon next year. I don't know how that would be better, but I think the state of health that you would find yourself, or the weight you're going to lose, right? The better you're going to feel about yourself, a new regimen in your life in order to get ready to actually complete a marathon. That the marathon is still a means to the end. The end is not necessarily the marathon, but it's so good, it's so preferable that it's like it occupies and preoccupies your mind. Like you may be doing nothing like that. You haven't even started yet, but you keep thinking, I want to be there, I want to be there, I want to be there. We've already talked about audacious outcome as a disciple of Christ. So your primary role is as a Christian, a follower of Christ. And what we talked about in session 2 with Pastor Jason and Ryan was this whole idea that one way of capturing the audacious outcome that God wants for all Christians is that we would have more and more of the mind of Christ, that we would think more naturally the way Jesus thinks about, as we read Scripture, as we go through life, and as we relate to other people. But today we're going to start off, your homework was to think about, other than being a Christian, what are two other primary roles that you have? It is safe to say that all of us have more than one role, okay? All of us are more than just a Christian, if we're Christians. We could be a spouse, we could be a parent, we could be a child, we could be a student, we could be a boss, we could be a worker, right? All these different kind of things. So we wanted you to do some thinking that you can apply this My Storyline stuff, both everything we've already gone over and where we're going to teach you today. You can apply it to not just being a Christian, you can apply it to other places in your life. So what would be an audacious outcome for me as a husband, right? Where it's such a more preferable way to be a husband that however I am a husband right now, that I would be motivated to do what I can to actually be that kind of husband. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is your assignment for the next 15 minutes. And this is to reinforce two people. Okay, not three, not four. Quickly find a partner and share the two other primary roles and their audacious outcomes. So if you've done the homework, those of you who are beavers, you did. Those of you who are dolphins, you thought about it, it was a good idea, but you never got around to doing it. It's okay, you can still be in the moment, okay? Think of, and you have other roles other than being a follower of Christ. What are two other primary roles, and what would be, and again, this may not be something that you're going to live with the rest of your life, but if you haven't had a chance to think about it yet, what would be a category or a candidate for an audacious outcome in one of these two other primary roles for yourself? And why did you select these particular roles? Why did these come to mind? And what's so motivating about these outcomes? Now, you may find that the outcome you've come up with is really kind of flat, and it's not that motivating, okay? So that's where maybe you can push each other and go, really? That's it's like, yes, I want to be neater, right? And it's like, okay, I'm sure whoever you live with would appreciate that, but I don't know if that's really going to, like, maybe the neatness is leading to something else. Maybe the neatness is because I'm messy, it actually drives the person I live with crazy. And so my audacious outcome is to actually help to be an agent of creating a pleasant environment for the person I live with, right? So that when they're, occupying the same space as me, that they feel at home and at peace. See, that's more of an audacious outcome than I'll pick up my socks. Right? Does that make sense? All right. So find a partner. And we'll actually, since we started a little late, we'll give you till 9:30. Okay? So that means both people have to be able to share.
All right. So right now we're going to go over, two ways, the ways God grows in us and how to become more than your personality type. What I've found out is that a lot of people, when they just learn about this test, they don't like it. They don't like taking a test. Can anyone tell me why?
I don't like it.
Well, if you're a tweener, right, in almost every category. But what do you think is the biggest objection to studying personality theory?
Because you're told these are your shortcomings.
Mm-hmm.
They're not only your strengths, but these are your shortcomings.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I think some people don't like being put into a box.
Yeah, exactly. You saw that in the personality, My Storyline web or Facebook page. Someone's like, well, I'm this and this. I'm divergent. Wait, if I'm not mistaken, Divergent is a story about a girl who could be all things in all situations, and that's her kind of abnormal superhuman power to be able to do all things. According to this theory, it's very, very difficult to do that. You're born with a certain temperament. You're born with some sort of predisposition. You grow up in a situation with your family, and that affects your character. And then you will have those two things, your character and your temperament equals your personality. But what we're studying is which is your natural inclination, your DNA structure of how are you predisposed to be. And so if you are a beaver, you're naturally going to want to seek what? What do beavers like? Concrete things. But it's something that they strive for in life is a sense of security, stability, knowing what's going to come in the future is the same thing that happened in the past. And that's how I find my belonging. I want to feel a sense of belonging and included in a certain community. If you're a fox, you're naturally going to seek what exactly? You said it. Fun. Let's change that to stimulation too. I think I did a poor job in talking about their weaknesses so much. I focus on fun, fun, fun. But stimulation can be hard work and a lot of pressure. And so even though it's fun to them, it's not fun in a reckless sense. It doesn't have to be fun in a reckless sense. It could be fun in a productive sense, and they want to be highly stimulated. Owls, NT owls, that's pretty easy. What do they search for? Knowledge. I don't think I need to expand on that. And then NF dolphins? Meaning? Meaning. That's good. Anyone else? This one's not as obvious. I mean, that's right, though. Purpose. Yeah, what is my purpose in life? What is the meaning in my life? Don't forget to put my in there. Because the meaning in your life, dolphins, is not a meaning in other people's lives. Ooh, really? What does that mean? How could that be? We're all searching for the same meaning. No. I was hanging out with some foxes, and we're at Shaka's, and you know what? I don't think I like dolphins that much. You see, it's funny because you got your dolphins opposite of, or diagonally from, which means the diametrical opposite from the foxes. And I'm like, well, why don't you like dolphins? You know, dolphins, can you foresee how a fox might not like you? Or feel unsettled by you? No, who wouldn't love a dolphin? We're great. We're so great that you would want to be like us. That's why we're like this. Well, the fox says, you know what? They seem a little not authentic. How could that be? We're so authentic. It's because they do things for other people, and I don't believe that they're truly doing it for other people. I believe that they're doing it for themselves. So they're trying to be selfish, but in an obtuse way. They're doing everything they do is for their benefit, but they try to confuse you by saying it's for the world. And that's not authentic. I'm like, oh, I could definitely see that. And for a fox who's thinking about stimulation, thinking about wanting to be in a high-pressure situation, they're not thinking about how other people think. They're thinking about how they think. And so they're just wondering, how can a dolphin do that? So I use that example to illustrate that it's very difficult to grow diagonally, because first thing people try to do is say, oh, I have all these weaknesses. Let me work on all my weaknesses so I could be the superhuman person. Very difficult to do that, and this is one reason why. Because intuitives have abstract thinking, think about the future, think about abstract goals, and sensors are more grounded in being practical, getting things done now, measurable goals. And so the way you perceive the world is completely different. Intuitives will always be more clumsy than sensors. They will not be present. So if you give them a list of instructions for intuitives to do, immediately they will not follow that. Beaver's like, what? The instructions are there so that you can follow. It makes it that much easier. It's like, yeah, but, well, for me, when I try to follow every instructions, I have to call up someone, what do you mean by this? What's your purpose in this? And they're like, why are you asking so much questions? Well, because it's not exactly clear. I want it written like a law book. And so I don't really understand beavers when they give an assignment, even like trivial things like changing settings on your security settings on your computer. I'm like, well, it's not really there exactly where you said because every computer has something different. I have a hard time following those instructions, so I immediately call someone and ask for help. But usually it's the beavers who change it. Oh yeah, this is what I do all the time. I'm aware of my security system. So it's very difficult to go diagonal. And so what does that really look like in real life to go diagonally? Owls naturally like to think about strategy, thinking about in broad strokes, how are we going to change this organization moving forward? Beavers naturally think of keeping things the same and making sure we don't screw up. Do you see how those are two opposing forces? And if you do both at the same time, it's hard to grow in any one category. Eventually you find out that you're not going to grow very much at all if you're trying to do all things. Dolphins, on the other hand, they're the ones who are seeking, why are we doing this? And so when Ken preaches, why are we Christian? What does it mean to be Christian? And foxes are, what benefit do I get to being Christian personally? Those are two opposing forces. It's hard to be both of them at the same time. So again, going diagonally or even going down, very difficult. To change their ability to go from N to S, extremely, extremely difficult. I say, and as Kersey, I agree with Kersey, who says, if you're going to grow, the growth is horizontally. NT will learn to be more diplomatic. NF Dolphin will learn to be more strategic. And we'll talk about what those terms mean. Beavers will learn to be more flexible. And foxes will learn to be more industrious. And so, an example, when we were working with Ken, when I was working with Ken at Beantown, he was saying, it works a lot better when we're doing things together, having an owl beside me. And why don't you give an example of what is your feelings on that?
Yeah, I kind of instinctively now, if I have a choice, I'll try to find an owl to work with, just because, like Jonathan's a beaver, and so he's great to work with because he gets things done, right? But when I'm working with an owl, I feel like on a deeper level, the owl really understands the big thing. Not like Jonathan doesn't get it, but Jonathan's listening to, so what do we have to do, right? And that's awesome, right? That's really important. But it's also important for me on a higher level, just because I'm a dolphin, to know that other people that I work with really still understand where I'm coming from. Okay, and so working with Ryan, he's such an owl. We both get where we're coming from. It's just, but he kind of pushed me like, when are we going to meet? And when do I start talking? And why do I talk here and you not talk here, right? And I just kind of feel all that. So I was like, well, I know how that's going to work, right? So in the same way, at Fuller right now, I have an owl who works in the new office that I'm the executive director of, and he's also been at school for 7 years. So he knows all the mucky mucks, he knows all the pathways, and so that's great because I'm only there 10 hours a week. But even if I was there 40 hours a week, I wouldn't have as much interest in all of those machinations. So he knows how that works to get things through, but I'm the better salesperson. Okay, so I'll say, okay, so I know now who I have to talk to. Let me go talk to them because I'm better talking to them than you, because you you lose them in the weeds. You get too much into all of your knowledge. Or it's funny because he's doing a spiritual formation group with some of the students, because he's an owl and I'm not there. he spends most of the time talking because he's so fascinated by all the book learning that he has, and it's like Ryan, right? And so I feel like if we were partnered, but it would be a bad use of my 10 hours, if I was there with him, I would go, okay, that's like 5 times more material than they can absorb. And plus, there are people in the room who have experiences, I'm intuiting, right, that they can bring to this. It's not all in the books that you read. You've given them enough, and now it's too much, right? So there's always these experiences where you're better together, and that's where we were saying, it's not just, try to pick up a little bit more of that second letter in your synergistic partner, but no matter how hard you and I work at echoing a little bit more that our partner has, there's nothing like actually having the partner. Does that make sense? So pick up some of the things that you and I lack, and that we see emulated in the person that would be a good mentor, and at the same time have them there. Because actually having them there brings their strength and brings your strength to whatever you're doing. Does that make sense? So it's both. It's don't just stay the way you are, but don't try to be what you're not, what you can't be. And at the same time, get in the habit of finding those people that are the natural partners for you.
Right, and so to give you an example, give you insight on how differently dolphins and owls think, is when I study personality theory, I'm focused on the letters. What does it mean to be a sensor? What does it mean to be intuitive? What does it mean to be I? What does it mean to be E? And I study so many iterations of that, but does anyone know why I might want to do that? It's not an easy answer.
Because you're an NT and you like numbers and facts and things like that?
Well, there's a reason why we study so many facts. It's because we feel that you'll have an answer for every situation if you study the ingredients that you're starting off with. So I get confused when I'm spending all this time about what does it be N, F, N, T, and I'm studying that, and Ken says, so what's their spiritual journey? I'm like, what? I mean, you could just study the letters and you'll figure that out. What's so hard about that? It's so easy. So basically, the reason why we're having trouble communicating this message of personality theory is because owls focus on it and have no ability to communicate the ideas. Why? Is it because they don't speak English? No, that's not the reason why. It's because they're only speaking in facts. They don't answer any relevant questions to a person's life. I shouldn't say any relevant. They don't answer a lot of answers to people's lives because the way books are constructed is talking about the ingredients, and the answers come hidden in one little line, and that's it. And so that's why that was like a huge epiphany for me. I mean, and I'm just realizing the magnitude of that epiphany when Ken says, so how do each personality experience shame? I'm like, what? That's not in the book. So why are you asking me that?
I made a connection.
Yeah, ask me only relevant questions. See, here's the Bible of personality theory. Let's focus on that. But the reason why is because owls cannot communicate to people, and so that's a huge roadblock. And so when we talk about growing, we want to grow horizontally. Is it to be just a more well-rounded person? Yes, that's part of the reason, to be more well-rounded. It's good for an NT owl to be more like a dolphin. But it's really to grow in your category. And what does that mean? For me to be an owl, to know so much about personality theory, and not be able to communicate that to one person, you think that might be a problem? Yeah, it's a huge problem. I probably shared it with 10 people in 15 years. In the last 6 months, I probably shared it with 100 people. I mean, it's a huge difference, right? And so, the same thing goes with a dolphin. You think, oh, this is the type of ideal feeling that we want to experience at church, but I'm not going to necessarily worry about the details. I'll just let it work. I'll just focus on the feeling, and everything will come to be. I mean, Ken says, oh, my dream is to say, make it so, and everything goes into place. And he says that I always call him, which is hilarious because I call him like 3 times, or I text him 3 times a week. 3 times a month. Are we going to talk about this?
More than that. it's more than that.
It just seems like that. No, but it's like, how do I know what I'm going to speak about? And this is why it's hard, because I'm speaking of all personality theory that we're going over is from a vantage point of being spiritual. And everything that I've learned before has nothing to do about spirituality. So that slant is something I have to ponder and reflect about at night before I go to sleep. Oh, what does it mean to be shameful and shameless and things such as that? And dolphins, a lot of time, you may take for granted the feeling that you want to experience is a feeling that everyone wants to experience, and the means to get there, that people will understand you. Let me tell you something. You're probably the hardest ones to understand if you have any lofty goals. So communication on how you're going to do things will be so important to your lives. Meaning, the reason why it's so important is because you could talk about feelings and why we need to be a certain way, why we need to be more accepting and loving in church. People say, yeah, that's so true, that's so true. But if you don't talk about how we're going to do that, you're not going to implement any sort of change.
So that's the strategic part. This next piece is the dolphin talking to the owl. So Ryan came up with the grid, right? It's only horizontal, it's not vertical or diagonal. And then my intuitive self says, but what stops us from actually growing like that? Right? So you can say, in theory, intuitives to intuitives and sensors to sensors. And then as an intuitive, I'm saying, yeah, but I actually don't see a lot of growth. I see a lot of roadblocks. So that's what he hadn't thought about. Right? So this whole course, I was laughing when we were meeting this week. I said, the way we started thinking about this course at the inception was all about his stuff. But then I let my dolphin self go, and it's like, oh, but we didn't imagine this, but I can see that there's pieces coming together that you haven't thought about, and this is where we're about to shift. It's like, okay, it's well and good to have this strategy about it's supposed to be horizontal and not diagonal or vertical, but it's like, why doesn't it happen more often than it does? What are the roadblocks? Does that make sense? Right? So that's the synergism that happens when the two of us get together.